Most people imagine bullying as a series of cruel words, awkward confrontations, or harmless pranks that eventually fade with time. But sometimes, a single moment can reveal how dangerous unchecked cruelty has become. At Westbrook High School, 16-year-old Nia Johnson spent months trying to avoid attention. Quiet, hardworking, and determined to start over after transferring schools. She hoped to leave her past behind and focus on building a better future. Instead, she found herself caught in the sights of a group rival who mistook kindness for weakness. What began as whispers and rumors slowly escalated into something far more serious. And when one violent encounter pushed Nia to the brink, the people responsible would soon discover that some actions carry consequences far greater than they ever imagined. The first time Nia Johnson walked through the doors of Westbrook High School, she promised herself she would keep her head down. It was a promise she had made before. New schools came with new opportunities, but they also came with risks. Nia understood that better than most teenagers her age. Her mother's job required frequent relocations, which meant she had spent much of her childhood learning how to adapt to unfamiliar environments. New classrooms, new neighborhoods, new faces. Every move forced her to start over. Most people assume that moving often made someone outgoing. For Nia, the opposite had happened. She had learned that blending in was usually easier than standing out. On that warm September morning, she adjusted the strap of her backpack and stepped into a hallway crowded with students. Lockers slammed shut. Friends greeted one another after summer break. Athletes gathered near trophy displays while members of various clubs handed out flyers promoting recruitment events. The school felt alive. For a moment, Nia allowed herself to feel optimistic. Maybe this place would be different. Maybe she could finally spend a year without becoming the new girl everyone talked about. Unfortunately, schools often formed opinions quickly. Within hours, students had already begun noticing her. Some were simply curious. Others weren't. During lunch, Nia sat alone at a table near the windows while reviewing her class schedule. She didn't mind eating alone. In fact, she preferred it. Solitude felt predictable, safe. As she opened a notebook, a burst of laughter caught her attention. 3 girls occupied a nearby table. Their names, she would later learn, were Chloe Patterson, Madison Reed, and Brianna Hayes. Individually, none of them seemed particularly intimidating. Together, however, they possessed something far more influential than physical strength: social power. They were popular, well-connected, and deeply aware of their position within the school's social hierarchy. Students wanted their approval. Teachers appreciated their academic performance. Coaches praised their involvement in extracurricular activities. From a distance, they appeared nearly perfect. Yet appearances often concealed uncomfortable truths. Nia noticed the girls glancing in her direction several times throughout lunch. At first, she ignored it. Then she heard one of them whisper something. The others laughed. She couldn't make out the words. She didn't need to. The meaning was obvious. For a brief moment, old memories surfaced. Different school, different faces. The same feeling. Nia lowered her eyes and returned to her notebook. Across the cafeteria, Chloe watched the reaction with amusement. "She's weird," Madison said. "She hasn't talked to anyone all day." Brianna added. Chloe shrugged. "Maybe she thinks she's too good for everyone." The statement wasn't based on evidence. It didn't need to be. People often created stories about strangers when they lacked real information. And those stories had a way of spreading. Over the following days, Nia focused on classes. She answered questions when teachers called on her, completed assignments early, avoided unnecessary attention. Yet, despite her efforts, she found herself becoming the subject of increasing speculation. Rumors appeared out of nowhere. Some students claimed she had been expelled from her previous school. Others insisted she came from a wealthy family and looked down on everyone around her. A few suggested she was simply antisocial. None of it was true. Yet truth rarely travels as quickly as gossip. By the end of her second week at Westbrook, Nia noticed students whispering when she passed through the hallways. Conversations sometimes stopped when she approached. Group projects became awkward. Invitations never arrived. The isolation wasn't dramatic enough to attract concern from teachers, but it was impossible to ignore. One afternoon, as she gathered books from her locker, a folded piece of paper fell to the floor. Confused, she picked it up. Inside was a crude drawing, accompanied by a short message. "Go back where you came from." Nia stared at the words. Around her, students continued walking through the hallway as though nothing unusual had happened. For several seconds, she simply stood there. Then she folded the paper carefully and slipped it into her backpack. She didn't report it. Didn't show anyone. Didn't even tell her mother. Instead, she convinced herself that things would improve if she remained patient. If she ignored the problem, perhaps it would eventually disappear. What Nia didn't realize was that the people targeting her were only getting started. And before long, their cruelty would escalate far beyond whispered rumors and anonymous notes. What began as gossip and exclusion seemed harmless to outsiders. But for Nia, the warning signs were already becoming impossible to ignore. As the weeks passed, a small group of students became increasingly obsessed with turning Nia into their next target, and their actions were about to cross a dangerous line. By the beginning of October, Nia Johnson had developed a routine. She arrived at school early enough to avoid crowded hallways. She ate lunch in quieter areas whenever possible. She left class promptly when the bell rang and rarely lingered after school activities. It wasn't the kind of high school experience most teenagers imagine, but it allowed her to avoid unnecessary attention. Or at least, that had been the plan. The problem with bullies was that they often interpreted avoidance as surrender, and surrender only encouraged them to push further. At first, Chloe Patterson and her friends treated Nia like a source of entertainment. They mocked the way she dressed, criticized her hairstyle, and laughed whenever she volunteered answers in class. The comments were rarely loud enough for teachers to hear, yet always loud enough for Nia to catch. The goal wasn't confrontation. The goal was erosion, a slow, steady effort to make someone feel unwelcome. One Monday morning, Nia arrived at her locker to find a sticker attached to the metal door. It displayed a cartoon image, accompanied by a racist joke. Several students standing nearby noticed it immediately. A few looked uncomfortable. Most simply walked away. Nia removed the sticker without saying a word. Behind her, laughter echoed from the opposite end of the hallway. She didn't need to turn around to know who it came from. The pattern continued throughout the week. Sometimes someone would hide her books. Sometimes her seat would mysteriously disappear before class. Once, a drink was spilled across her desk minutes before a lesson began. Every incident seemed minor when viewed individually. Together, they created something much larger. A message? You don't belong here. What hurt most wasn't always the actions themselves. It was the silence surrounding them. Students witnessed what was happening. They saw the whispers. They heard the comments. They watched the humiliation unfold. Yet very few said anything. Not because they agreed, because they were afraid. Afraid of becoming targets themselves. Afraid of losing social standing. Afraid of standing alone. Nia understood that fear. In truth, she felt it every day. One afternoon, her history teacher assigned a group presentation worth a significant portion of the semester grade. Students immediately began forming teams. Before Nia could approach anyone, groups had already been created. Every student found a place except her. The teacher eventually noticed, "Does anyone still need a partner?" Silence. The classroom suddenly became very interested in notebooks, phones, and computer screens. Nia felt dozens of eyes avoiding hers. Finally, the teacher assigned her to a group that clearly didn't want her there. The rejection wasn't spoken aloud. It didn't need to be. The expression said enough. That evening, Nia sat at the kitchen table working on homework, while her mother prepared dinner nearby. Monica Johnson glanced toward her daughter several times. Something felt different. Nia had always been quiet, but recently she seemed distant, distracted, as though carrying a weight she didn't want anyone else to see. "How was school?" Monica asked. The question sounded casual. "Normal." Nia's pencil paused for half a second. Then she resumed writing. It was fine. Monica studied her for a moment. Years of parenting had taught her when someone was withholding information. Unfortunately, it had also taught her that forcing a conversation rarely worked. So she nodded. Good. The topic ended there. For now. Across town, Chloe and her friends spent the evening exchanging messages in a private group chat. Screenshots. Photos. Jokes at Nia's expense. The conversation grew increasingly cruel as the night continued. At one point, Madison uploaded a picture secretly taken during lunch. Within minutes, dozens of laughing reactions appeared. Someone suggested posting it publicly. Someone else suggested something worse. The idea should have sounded ridiculous. Instead, everyone laughed. What none of them realized was how quickly casual cruelty could become dangerous. Because every act of bullying creates a need for escalation. Yesterday's joke becomes today's normal behavior. Today's normal behavior becomes tomorrow's challenge. And eventually, someone pushes too far. The following Friday, that process took another step forward. As students exited gym class, Nia opened her locker and immediately sensed something was wrong. Her backpack felt unusually light. Confused, she searched inside. Notebooks, pencils, folders. But one important item was missing: her laptop. The computer contained months of assignments, projects, and personal work. Her stomach tightened. She checked again. Then a third time. Nothing. A burst of laughter echoed nearby. Nia looked up. Across the hallway, Chloe, Madison, and Brianna stood watching, smiling, not saying a word, just smiling. For the first time since arriving at Westbrook High, anger briefly broke through the fear. Because deep down, Nia knew exactly who had taken it. The problem was proving it. And without proof, nobody seemed willing to listen. The bullying was no longer limited to jokes and rumors. Someone had crossed a line, and Nia was running out of ways to pretend everything was okay. As pressure continued building around her, Nia faced an impossible choice: stay silent and endure the harassment, or risk becoming an even bigger target by fighting back. Nia spent most of the weekend trying to convince herself that the missing laptop would eventually turn up. Maybe it had been misplaced. Maybe someone had taken it as a prank and would return it anonymously. Maybe she was overreacting. Deep down, however, she already knew the truth. The laptop hadn't simply disappeared. Someone had taken it. And judging by the expression she had seen in the hallway on Friday afternoon, she had a strong suspicion about who was responsible. Monday arrived with a sense of dread that settled heavily in her chest. As she walked through the front entrance of Westbrook High School, she felt dozens of conversations swirling around her. Most had nothing to do with her. Yet after weeks of bullying, every laugh sounded personal. Every whisper felt directed at her. That was one of the cruelest effects of prolonged harassment. Eventually, it followed you everywhere. Nia headed straight to the administrative office before first period and reported the missing laptop. The staff listened politely and promised to review security footage, but their responses felt cautious. We'll look into it. We can't make assumptions. We need evidence. All reasonable statements? Unfortunately, reasonable statements offered very little comfort when your schoolwork had vanished. By lunchtime, no updates had been provided. The laptop remained missing. Meanwhile, rumors continued spreading through the student body. Someone claimed Nia had invented the theft to gain sympathy. Someone else suggested she was trying to get certain students in trouble. The story changed depending on who told it. The facts mattered less than the entertainment. As Nia sat alone beneath a tree near the edge of campus, she tried focusing on a history assignment. The words blurred together. She couldn't concentrate. For the first time since transferring schools, she found herself wondering whether leaving would be easier. Not permanently, just transferring again, starting over somewhere else. The thought felt painfully familiar. A voice interrupted her. "Mind if I sit here?" Nia looked up. A boy stood nearby holding a lunch tray. She recognized him immediately. His name was Marcus Ellis. They shared 2 classes, but had exchanged only a handful of words all semester. "Sûr," she replied quietly. Marcus sat down. For several moments, neither spoke. Then he finally sighed. "They took your laptop." "Didn't they?" Nia blinked. The directness caught her off guard. "I don't know." "Yeah, you do." His response wasn't cruel. It sounded frustrated, almost disappointed. Nia stared at the ground. "You saw something," Marcus hesitated. "Not exactly." The answer told her everything. He knew more than he wanted to admit. Unfortunately, fear prevented him from saying it openly. The same fear that kept so many students silent. "I can't prove anything." Marcus continued. "But you're not imagining this, for reasons she couldn't explain." Those words mattered. Not because they solved the problem, because they confirmed she wasn't alone. Someone else saw what was happening. Someone else understood. Across campus, Chloe and her friends occupied their usual table in the cafeteria. The stolen laptop had become a private joke among them. None of them seemed particularly concerned. After all, nobody had accused them directly. Nobody had proof. From their perspective, they were untouchable. That confidence only made them bolder. Later that afternoon, Nia finally received an email from the administration. Security footage had been reviewed. Unfortunately, there was no clear evidence identifying the person responsible. The investigation was being closed. She stared at the message in disbelief. That was it. No laptop. No answers. No consequences. Just another reminder that some people seemed capable of getting away with almost anything. That evening, Monica Johnson returned home later than usual. Her work often demanded long hours, but tonight she noticed something immediately. Nia wasn't studying. She wasn't reading. She wasn't watching television. Instead, she sat quietly on the couch, staring at nothing. Monica felt a knot form in her stomach. Parents sometimes sensed when something was wrong, long before they learned the details. This felt like one of those moments. She sat beside her daughter. "Talk to me." Nia forced a smile. "I'm okay." Monica didn't respond immediately. Years of experience had taught her how to recognize a lie told out of self-protection. And this was one of them. For several seconds, silence filled the room. Then Monica gently placed a hand over Nia's. "You don't always have to carry things by yourself." The words nearly broke her. For a moment, Nia considered telling the truth. The insults, the rumors, the missing laptop, everything. But fear stopped her. What if things got worse? What if reporting the bullying only made her an even bigger target? So she swallowed the words. And once again, she chose silence. What neither of them realized was that the situation had already moved beyond ordinary school bullying. And very soon, events would begin spiraling in a direction no one could control. Nia wasn't the only one noticing the bullying anymore. The problem was that the people who knew the truth were still too afraid to speak. As Chloe and her friends grew more confident, their actions became increasingly reckless, and the next incident would push Nia closer than ever to her breaking point. The following week began with an uncomfortable realization. The bullying wasn't slowing down. It was accelerating. For Chloe Patterson and her friends, the lack of consequences felt like permission. The missing laptop investigation had gone nowhere. Teachers remained largely unaware of what was happening. Students continued avoiding involvement. In their minds, they had won. That belief made them careless. And careless people often reveal their true character. On Tuesday morning, Nia arrived at school carrying a replacement laptop provided temporarily through a district loan program. It wasn't ideal, but it allowed her to complete assignments while she searched for a long-term solution. The moment she entered her first class, she noticed several students looking at their phones. Some glanced toward her, then quickly looked away. A familiar feeling settled into her stomach. Something was wrong. She just didn't know what. The answer arrived less than 10 minutes later. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. You should see what they're posting. Attached was a screenshot. Nia opened it. The air seemed to leave her lungs. Someone had created an edited social media account using her name and photo. The page contained fake posts designed to make her appear arrogant and insulting toward other students. Hundreds of people had already viewed it. Dozens had shared it. Comments continued pouring in. Some believed the account was real. Others simply found it entertaining. Either way, the damage was spreading. Nia immediately reported the page. But online humiliation moved faster than any reporting system. By lunch period, students across campus were discussing it. When she entered the cafeteria, conversations quieted, then resumed. Whispers followed. The fake account was doing exactly what it had been designed to do: isolate her. Across the room, Chloe and her friends struggled to hide their amusement. They weren't openly celebrating. They didn't need to. The smile said enough. For the first time, anger outweighed fear. Nia stood, walked across the cafeteria, and stopped directly in front of their table. The surrounding noise faded almost instantly. What do you want? Chloe asked. Nia's voice shook slightly. Not from weakness, from months of frustration. Leave me alone. The table fell silent. Then Madison laughed. Actually laughed. As though the request itself was ridiculous. We're not doing anything. You know exactly what you're doing. Several nearby students looked away. Others watched carefully. Nobody intervened. Chloe leaned back in her chair. Maybe people just don't like you. The words hit harder than Nia expected, because part of her feared they might be true. Not logically. Emotionally. That was how bullying worked. It convinced victims to question themselves, to wonder whether they somehow deserved the treatment they received. Nia turned and walked away before the tears forming in her eyes became visible. Behind her, laughter erupted. Louder this time. Grueler. That afternoon, she locked herself inside a bathroom stall during study period and cried for nearly 20 minutes. Not because of one comment. Not because of one fake account. Because months of pressure had finally begun breaking through the walls she worked so hard to maintain. For the first time, she felt genuinely exhausted. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Monica Johnson sat inside a conference room reviewing case files from work. She had no idea her daughter was crying alone inside a school bathroom. No idea that the situation had become this severe. No idea that events were moving steadily toward a moment that would change both of their lives. And when that moment arrived, everyone involved would wish they had acted sooner. Months of bullying had pushed Nia to her emotional limit. Unfortunately, Chloe and her friends were nowhere near finished. As the harassment expanded beyond school hallways and into the digital world, a single reckless decision would soon transform a cruel game into a dangerous crisis. For the rest of the week, Nia Johnson moved through Westbrook High School like a shadow. She attended classes, completed assignments, answered questions when teachers called on her. From the outside, everything appeared normal. Inside, however, she felt herself slowly unraveling. The fake social media account was eventually removed, but the damage lingered. Screenshots continued circulating among students. Rumors spread faster than corrections. Even people who knew the account was fake still discussed it as though there might be some truth behind it. That was the problem with public humiliation. Once released, It developed a life of its own. By Friday morning, Nia noticed dark circles beneath her eyes when she looked in the bathroom mirror. She wasn't sleeping well anymore. Every night, she replayed conversations from school. Every morning, she woke up wondering what would happen next. The constant anxiety was exhausting. Yet she still refused to tell her mother. Part of her worried Monica would overreact. Another part feared disappointing her. Monica worked hard, long hours, constant pressure, important responsibilities. The last thing Nia wanted was to become another burden. So she kept smiling, kept pretending, kept carrying the weight alone. Unfortunately, problems ignored rarely disappear. They grow. That afternoon, students filled the gymnasium for a school pep rally, celebrating upcoming athletic competitions. Music blasted through speakers while cheerleaders performed routines at center court. The atmosphere was loud, energetic, and chaotic. For most students, it was a welcome break from class. For Nia, it felt like a nightmare. Large crowds meant less supervision. Less supervision meant more opportunities for humiliation. She chose a seat near the back and hoped to remain unnoticed. That hope lasted less than 10 minutes. A loud burst of laughter erupted several rows behind her. At first, she ignored it. Then someone called her name. She turned reluctantly. A group of students were pointing at the giant projection screen hanging above the gym floor. Confused, Nia looked up. Her stomach dropped. Someone had managed to display a heavily edited image of her face on the screen. The picture had been altered to appear ridiculous. Crude captions surrounded it. The entire gym erupted with reactions. Some students laughed. Others gasped. Teachers immediately began searching for whoever was responsible. But the damage had already been done. Nia felt hundreds of eyes shifting toward her. The humiliation hit like a physical blow. Without thinking, she stood and hurried toward the nearest exit. Tears blurred her vision. Behind her, confusion spread throughout the crowd. Several students looked uncomfortable. Others seemed unsure how to react. For perhaps the first time, the cruelty had become so public that even bystanders could no longer pretend it was harmless. Outside the gym, Nia sat alone on a bench near the athletic fields. Her hands trembled. She wanted to disappear. Wanted the day to end. Wanted everything to stop. A voice interrupted her thoughts. Nia, she looked up. It was Marcus Ellis. He approached cautiously before sitting beside her. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Marcus shook his head. They've gone too far. Nia laughed bitterly. You think I'm serious? Suawi. Silence followed, the kind that appears when someone has reached the end of their patience. Eventually, Marcus looked toward the football field. I know who did it. Nia turned sharply. What he swallowed. I saw Chloe talking to one of the media club students this morning. For a brief moment, hope flickered, then faded. Will you tell someone? Marcus hesitated. The answer was visible before he spoke. Fear. Again, always fear. If I do, they'll come after me. The words hurt because they were honest. Nia couldn't even blame him. The entire situation existed because too many people were afraid. Marcus lowered his eyes. I'm sorry. Nia nodded. Suang. That evening, when she returned home, Monica immediately sensed something had changed. Nia barely touched dinner. She spoke only when necessary. Several times she seemed on the verge of saying something before changing her mind. Monica watched carefully. Concern deepened with every passing minute. After dinner, she finally stopped her daughter before she could disappear into her room. Yeah? The teenager froze. Look at me. Slowly. Nia did. What Monica saw made her heart sink. Pain. Exhaustion, fear. No parent needed special training to recognize those emotions. Something was wrong, very wrong. And for the first time, Monica became certain that her daughter was hiding more than ordinary teenage stress. What she didn't know was just how serious the truth had become. Monica finally realized something was deeply wrong. The problem was that Naya still wasn't ready to tell her everything. While Monica searched for answers at home, Chloe and her friends continued pushing boundaries at school, unaware that their next decision would set events in motion that could never be undone. The conversation Monica wanted never happened. At least not that night, when she asked Nia if everything was okay. The answer came exactly as expected. "I'm fine." The words sounded automatic. Practiced. The kind of response someone gives after repeating it too many times. Monica considered pressing further. Instead, she chose patience. Over the years, she had learned that trust often opened doors. Force could not. If something was wrong, she believed Nia would eventually tell her. Unfortunately, events were moving much faster than either of them realized. The following Monday began with an unusual level of tension. Students whispered throughout the hallways. Phones appeared during class transitions. Small groups gathered around lockers, discussing something that had happened over the weekend. Naya quickly discovered the reason. A video had surfaced online. At first glance, it seemed harmless. Just another short clip recorded at school. Then she saw herself. Someone had compiled several embarrassing moments from recent weeks into a single edited video. The cafeteria confrontation, the fake social media posts, footage of her leaving the pep rally, images taken without her permission. Everything combined into a cruel highlight reel. The caption read, "Westbrook's biggest drama queen." Thousands of views had already accumulated. Comments continued arriving every minute. Nia stared at the screen in disbelief. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The bullying was no longer confined to school grounds. Now strangers were participating. People who had never met her, people who knew nothing about her life. Yet they laughed anyway. Because online cruelty often required no context, only a target. As the day progressed, the atmosphere around her changed. Students who previously ignored the situation now recognized her from the video. Some offered sympathetic looks. Others avoided eye contact entirely. A few openly laughed. Each reaction hurt in its own way. By lunch period, Nia locked herself inside a bathroom stall and silenced her phone. She couldn't bear reading another comment, another joke, another reminder that her humiliation had become public entertainment. Meanwhile, Chloe and her friends celebrated. The video's popularity exceeded their expectations. What began as casual bullying had transformed into a source of social status. More attention, more laughter, more validation. None of them stopped to consider the consequences. Success made them reckless. That afternoon, a teacher finally reported concerns regarding the ongoing harassment. Administrators promised to investigate. Meetings were scheduled. Statements would be collected. Yet the response felt painfully late. Months late, the damage had already spread far beyond what anyone could easily repair. After school, Marcus approached Nia near the bus loop. He looked nervous, more nervous than usual. "I need to tell you something." Naya immediately sensed trouble. "What is it?" Marcus glanced around before lowering his voice. "I heard Chloe talking this morning." A knot formed in Nia's stomach. "What about they want to confront you?" The words hung heavily in the air. Nia frowned. "Confront me. They think you're reporting them." "I haven't." "I know." Marcus looked genuinely worried. "But they don't care." For several seconds, neither spoke. The warning felt vague. Yet something about Marcus's expression made it impossible to dismiss. These weren't rumors. He was afraid, and fear was contagious. That evening, Naya sat alone in her bedroom replaying the conversation. "Confront you." The phrase echoed repeatedly in her mind. Perhaps nothing would happen. Perhaps Marcus misunderstood. Perhaps she was worrying unnecessarily. But deep down, instinct told her otherwise. For the first time in months, She felt genuine danger approaching. Not embarrassment. Not danger. And somewhere else in the city, Monica Johnson reviewed legal documents at her office. Completely unaware. Within days, everything would change. The bullying had evolved beyond rumors and online harassment. Now, for the first time, there were signs that something far more dangerous was coming. As tensions reached a breaking point, a confrontation began taking shape inside Westbrook High, one that would leave an entire school wishing it had acted sooner. The warning Marcus gave Nia stayed with her throughout the week. At first, she tried convincing herself that it meant nothing. Teenagers made threats all the time. Rumors spread. Emotions flared. Most confrontations ended with harsh words and little else. But every time she saw Chloe and her friends whispering together, the uneasy feeling returned. Something was changing. The looks they gave her seemed different now. Less playful. Less interested in embarrassing her. More hostile. By Thursday afternoon, even Marcus appeared increasingly anxious. Twice, he started conversations with Nia, only to stop himself midway through a sentence. During lunch, he scanned the cafeteria repeatedly as though expecting trouble. The behavior didn't go unnoticed. "What aren't you telling me?" Nia finally asked. Marcus hesitated. Then I heard them talking again. Nia's stomach tightened. "What did they say?" "They think someone is helping you." "What?" "They think somebody reported the fake account and the video." Nia stared at him. "I didn't even report half of that stuff." "I know." Marcus lowered his voice. "The problem is they don't believe you." For several seconds, neither spoke. The situation suddenly felt more dangerous than before. People who believed they were losing control often became unpredictable. And over the past few weeks, Chloe and her friends had experienced something unfamiliar. Resistance. Students were beginning to question them. Teachers were paying closer attention. Some of their classmates no longer found their behavior amusing. To them, Nia represented the reason. That belief made her an easy target. The final bell rang shortly afterward. As students flooded into the hallways, Nia gathered her books and headed toward the parking lot where her bus usually stopped. She wanted nothing more than to go home. Unfortunately, she never made it that far. Near the rear staircase connecting two academic wings, she noticed Chloe, Madison, and Brianna standing together, waiting. The moment Chloe saw her, a smile appeared. Not a friendly smile, the kind that immediately triggered alarm. Nia lowered her eyes and changed direction. A mistake. The movement confirmed exactly what the girls wanted to see. Fear. Behind her, laughter erupted. "Look at her run." The words echoed through the hallway. Students nearby glanced over corners. Most kept walking. A few slowed down. Nobody intervened. Nia continued toward the front entrance without looking back. Her heart pounded against her ribs. When she finally stepped outside, relief washed over her. The confrontation never happened. At least not yet. But the message had been delivered. They were escalating. And they wanted her to know it. That evening, Monica arrived home earlier than usual. She found Nia sitting at the kitchen counter pretending to complete homework. Pretending. Because her eyes hadn't moved from the same page in nearly 10 minutes. Monica noticed immediately. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from her daughter. For several moments, silence filled the room. Then Monica spoke. "Someone's hurting you." It wasn't a question. The directness caught her off guard. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." The response was calm. Certain. Monica had spent years reading people professionally. Reading her own daughter was much easier. Nia looked away. Tears threatened to form. For a brief moment, Monica thought the truth was finally coming. Instead, Nia stood. "I'm tired." Then she disappeared upstairs. Monica remained seated long after she left. A knot tightened in her chest. She didn't know exactly what was happening, but she knew enough. Something was wrong at school. Very wrong. And if the situation continued much longer, she feared the consequences could become serious. What neither of them realized was that serious no longer lay in the future. It was already approaching. Only one more push remained. The hostility was no longer hidden behind jokes and rumors. The people targeting Nia were becoming increasingly aggressive, and they were running out of patience. As Friday approached, tensions reached a level no one fully understood. What began as bullying was about to become a violent confrontation that would shock an entire school. Friday morning felt strangely normal. The sky was clear. Classes followed their usual schedule. Students discussed weekend plans and upcoming football games. To most people at Westbrook High School, it seemed like an ordinary day. For Nia Johnson, however, the uneasy feeling from the previous week refused to disappear. She noticed Chloe watching her during first period, Madison during lunch, Brianna outside the library. Each sighting increased the pressure building inside her chest. By the final hour of the school day, she wanted only one thing: to leave. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. The incident began shortly after the dismissal bell. Hundreds of students poured into the hallways at once, creating the usual chaos that accompanied the end of the school week. Nia exited her classroom and headed toward the main entrance. Halfway there, someone stepped into her path. Chloe. Nia immediately stopped before she could turn away. Madison appeared beside her. Then Brianna. The corridor suddenly felt much smaller. Several students nearby slowed their pace. Instinct told them something was about to happen. "What do you want?" Nia asked quietly. Chloe crossed her arms. "We want the truth." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop lying." The conversation attracted attention immediately. More students gathered. Phones appeared. Nobody seemed willing to leave. Nia felt panic beginning to rise. "I didn't do anything." "Really?" Madison snapped. "Then why are teachers suddenly asking questions? Why are people turning against us?" The accusations came rapidly, emotionally, irrationally. None of it made sense. But people looking for someone to blame rarely care about logic. They care about targets. And Nia had become theirs. The argument intensified. Voices grew louder. Students formed a loose circle around the confrontation. Some appeared concerned. Others looked excited. Too many simply watched. Then everything happened at once. Someone shoved Nia. She stumbled backward. Gasps erupted. Another push followed. The crowd surged. Chaos spread. Students shouted conflicting instructions. Some told everyone to stop. Others continued recording. In the confusion, physical boundaries disappeared. Hands grabbed. People collided. What began as an argument transformed into something far more dangerous. Nia struggled to regain her balance. Then she felt pressure around her neck. For a moment, her brain refused to process what was happening. The grip tightened. Panic exploded through her body. She clawed desperately at the hands restraining her. The hallway blurred. Voices became distorted. Distant. Someone screamed. Another student yelled for a teacher. The pressure continued. Nia's vision darkened. She tried to breathe. Couldn't. Fear gave way to instinct. Instinct gave way to weakness. Her legs buckled. The world tilted, then disappeared. Nia collapsed onto the floor. Motionless, the hallway fell silent. Not completely, but enough. Enough for everyone present to understand that something terrible had just happened. Phones lowered. Faces turned pale. Several students backed away. Others stood frozen. For the first time, nobody was laughing. A teacher came running from a nearby classroom. Then another. Someone called 911. Someone else shouted for the school nurse. The crowd began breaking apart. Panic replaced curiosity. Because this was no longer bullying. No longer a prank. No longer school drama. A student lay unconscious on the floor, and within 5 minutes, A phone call would reach a woman who was about to change the lives of everyone involved. The bullying had finally crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Now, the consequences were coming, and they were arriving much faster than anyone expected. As emergency responders rushed toward Westbrook High, a single phone call reached Nia's mother. The people responsible believed they were facing an angry parent. They had no idea who Monica Johnson really was. 5 minutes after Nia Johnson collapsed in the hallway, a phone began vibrating on a conference table nearly 15 miles away. Monica Johnson glanced at the screen. The caller ID displayed the name of Westbrook High School. At first, she assumed it was a routine administrative matter, perhaps attendance, perhaps paperwork, perhaps a scheduling issue. Then she answered. Everything changed. The voice on the other end sounded tense, careful, controlled. The kind of voice people use when trying not to create panic. Immediately, Monica knew something was wrong. Very wrong. As the assistant principal explained the situation, the color drained from her face. The room around her seemed to disappear. She heard fragments. Student altercation. Medical emergency. Loss of consciousness. Emergency services en route. For several seconds after the call ended, Monica remained completely still. Across the conference table, several colleagues noticed the change immediately. Monica, no response. She was already gathering her things. What happened? Monica finally looked up. My daughter. Those 2 words were enough. No further explanation was needed. Within moments, she was moving through the building with a speed that startled everyone around her. Meanwhile, back at Westbrook High School, chaos continued unfolding. Paramedics had arrived. Teachers attempted to manage frightened students. Administrators struggled to collect witness statements while maintaining order. Near the main office, Chloe Patterson sat trembling in a chair. The confidence that had defined her for months was gone. Completely gone. Madison wasn't much better. Neither was Brianna. For the first time since targeting Nia, they appeared genuinely afraid. Not afraid of detention. Not afraid of suspension. Afraid of what had actually happened. Because regardless of how the confrontation began, one fact remained impossible to ignore. Nia had stopped breathing normally. She had collapsed, and an ambulance had transported her to the hospital. The reality was becoming impossible to escape. Several students who witnessed the incident sat nearby, waiting to provide statements. Among them was Marcus Ellis. He stared at the floor in silence. A crushing sense of guilt settled over him. He had known tensions were escalating. He had seen warning signs. He had heard conversations. Yet he never spoke loudly enough. Never pushed hard enough. Now a girl lay in a hospital bed. The realization hurt. Inside the administrative office, Principal Rebecca Langford reviewed preliminary reports. Each new statement painted a more disturbing picture. Months of harassment, escalating intimidation, public online targeting, repeated incidents that should have been addressed much earlier. The confrontation in the hallway wasn't an isolated event. It was the final stage of something that had been growing for months. And now everyone was being forced to confront it. Approximately 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled sharply into the school's visitor parking area. The vehicle stopped before it had fully settled. Monica Johnson stepped out. Her expression revealed nothing. No panic, no shouting, no visible anger. Yet, something about her presence immediately caught attention. Teachers near the entrance exchanged uncertain glances. Administrators straightened instinctively. Even security personnel seemed to recognize the seriousness of the moment. Monica entered the building with measured steps. Purposeful. Controlled. Dangerously controlled? Because some forms of anger are loud. Others are silent. The silent kind often proves far more powerful. Principal Langford approached immediately. Ms. Johnson, how is my daughter? The question arrived calmly. Almost too calmly. The paramedics stabilized her before transport. Monica nodded once. Good. Nothing more. No emotional outburst. No accusation. No threats. That reaction surprised everyone. Most parents would have exploded. Monica simply listened. Observed. Evaluated. As though gathering information. And in many ways, that was exactly what she was doing. Because unlike everyone else in the building, Monica understood something important. Emotions faded. Evidence remained. And before the day ended, she intended to learn exactly what had happened to her daughter. The school expected an emotional parent. Instead, they were facing someone far more dangerous, a woman who understood how accountability truly worked. As investigators collected statements and security footage, Westbrook's administrators began learning a startling truth about Nia's mother, one that would send shockwaves through the entire school community. By early evening, news of the hallway incident had spread throughout Westbrook High School and far beyond. Parents discussed it in group chats. Students exchanged updates online. Rumors multiplied by the hour. Some stories exaggerated what happened. Others minimized it. Very few captured the full truth. At the hospital, however, facts mattered far more than rumors. Nia remained under medical observation while doctors completed evaluations. Fortunately, she had regained consciousness, though she remembered very little about the final moments before collapsing. The physical injuries appeared manageable. The emotional damage was another matter entirely. Monica sat beside her daughter's bed for nearly an hour before speaking. Neither mentioned the bullying immediately. Neither mentioned the hallway. For a while, they simply sat together. Then Nia quietly asked a question. "Are you disappointed in me?" Monica frowned. "Why would I be disappointed? I should have told you." The words emerged barely above a whisper. Monica reached for her daughter's hand. "No." Tears formed in Nia's eyes. "I thought I could handle it." For the first time, Monica saw the full weight her daughter had been carrying. The isolation, the humiliation, the fear, months of pain hidden behind forced smiles and short conversations. And suddenly, one thing became painfully clear. The hallway incident hadn't begun that afternoon. It had begun long before, back at Westbrook High School. Administrators continued reviewing security footage and witness accounts. The deeper they looked, the worse the situation appeared. Videos, messages, online posts, student testimony. Evidence existed everywhere. The question was no longer whether bullying occurred. The question was how it had been allowed to continue for so long. During an emergency evening meeting, several district officials joined school leadership to discuss next steps. Partway through the discussion, one administrator asked a seemingly simple question. "Who exactly is Monica Johnson?" The room fell quiet. Principal Langford exchanged a glance with another district representative. Then she answered. The reaction was immediate. Several people stared in disbelief. Others sat back in stunned silence. Because Monica Johnson wasn't simply an upset parent, she wasn't merely a concerned mother demanding answers. She was one of the most respected chief prosecutors in the state. For years, she had built a reputation handling complex criminal cases, public corruption investigations, and high-profile prosecutions. Judges knew her name. Law enforcement agencies knew her name. Defense attorneys certainly knew her name. More importantly, she understood evidence, procedure, accountability. And she had spent an entire career uncovering the truth behind situations that initially appeared much simpler than they really were. Suddenly, the atmosphere inside the meeting changed. Not because anyone feared special treatment, because they understood something else. If mistakes had been made, Monica Johnson would find them. Every one of them. Later that evening, while reviewing statements at the hospital, Monica received a folder containing preliminary reports from the school. She read every page carefully. Then she noticed something troubling. Several incidents described by students had never appeared in official disciplinary records. Her expression hardened. The omission might have been accidental, or it might not. Either way, she intended to find out. Across town, Chloe, Madison, and Brianna sat inside their respective homes, experiencing a sleepless night. For the first time, the reality of what happened began settling in. Not because of punishment. Not yet. Because they were finally confronting the possibility that their actions had real consequences. And those consequences were only beginning. The students responsible feared suspension. They had no idea that a far deeper investigation was already taking shape. As Monica began examining months of overlooked incidents, hidden details started emerging. Details that would force Westbrook High to confront failures, extending far beyond a single hallway fight. The following Monday, Westbrook High School felt like a completely different place. The usual noise that filled the hallways seemed muted. Conversations stopped when teachers walked by. Students who normally rushed between classes lingered near bulletin boards and office doors, searching for updates about the incident. Everyone wanted answers. More importantly, everyone wanted to know what would happen next. By then, the district had launched a formal investigation. Outside consultants were brought in. Student statements continued to be collected. Security footage from multiple locations was reviewed. Digital evidence was preserved. What initially appeared to be a single act of violence was rapidly revealing itself as part of a much larger pattern. And the deeper investigators looked, the more disturbing that pattern became. Several students who had remained silent for months suddenly began speaking. One reported witnessing racist comments directed at Nia during lunch periods. Another described seeing her belongings damaged on multiple occasions. Others provided screenshots of online conversations, videos, and messages that had never been reported. For years, fear had protected the people responsible. Now fear was working against them. Because once enough students realized they were no longer alone, the silence began breaking apart. Inside a district conference room, investigators assembled timelines covering nearly 4 months of harassment. Every incident was documented. Dates, witnesses, evidence, patterns. By the end of the review, one conclusion became impossible to ignore. The hallway assault had not been spontaneous. It was the culmination of a prolonged campaign of intimidation that had been escalating for weeks. That distinction mattered a great deal. Meanwhile, Monica Johnson continued cooperating fully with the process. To the surprise of many administrators, she never raised her voice, never demanded special treatment, never attempted to influence the investigation. Instead, she focused on facts. Question. Documentation. The approach unsettled some people far more than anger would have. Because emotional reactions could be dismissed, evidence could not. Late Monday afternoon, Principal Langford met privately with Monica. The meeting lasted nearly an hour. At one point, Langford slid a folder across the table. Inside were records of complaints that should have received greater attention. Several warning signs had been missed. Others had been underestimated. Monica reviewed every page carefully. When she finally looked up, disappointment filled her expression. Not outrage. Disappointment. Somehow that felt worse. These students asked adults for help, she said quietly. Langford lowered her eyes. I know. They trusted the system. I know. And the system failed them. The room fell silent, because neither woman could honestly argue with that conclusion. Across town, Chloe Patterson sat inside her bedroom staring at the ceiling. Her phone remained untouched on the nightstand. For the first time in years, social status offered no protection, no comfort, no distraction, only anxiety. The investigation had already uncovered far more evidence than she expected. Students she considered friends had provided statements. Others had shared screenshots. Videos continued surfacing. The illusion of control she once enjoyed was collapsing, and deep down, she understood why. Because none of the evidence was fabricated. Most of it was real. That truth was impossible to escape. The same realization was occurring inside other homes as well. Parents who once dismissed complaints as ordinary teenage drama were suddenly confronting something much more serious. Not misunderstandings, not harmless jokes, a sustained pattern of cruelty. And for many, that realization arrived painfully late. Meanwhile, Nia continued recovering. Physically, she improved quickly. Emotionally, recovery would take longer. Yet something had changed. For the first time in months, she no longer felt isolated. Students sent messages of support. Teachers checked on her regularly. Former bystanders reached out to apologize for remaining silent. None of it erased the past. But it reminded her that the story wasn't ending where it began. Because sometimes the most important change occurs when people finally choose courage over comfort. And at Westbrook High School, that change was only beginning. As more students came forward, the truth became impossible to ignore. The question was no longer who was responsible, but how far the consequences would reach. Months of bullying had finally been exposed. Now the investigation was nearing its conclusion, and the people involved were about to learn that accountability rarely stops with a single individual. 2 weeks later, the investigation reached its final stage. By that point, the findings filled hundreds of pages: witness interviews, digital records, security footage, administrative reports, student statements. Together, they painted a picture far more troubling than anyone initially imagined. The district released its conclusions during a special board meeting attended by parents, staff, and community members. The auditorium was nearly full. Many arrived expecting updates about the hallway incident. Instead, they received something much larger. The report confirmed that Nia Johnson had been subjected to repeated harassment over an extended period. The bullying included social exclusion, racist targeting, online humiliation, intimidation, theft-related allegations, and multiple incidents that should have triggered earlier intervention. Several disciplinary actions were announced immediately. The students directly involved faced long-term suspensions and mandatory behavioral review programs. Additional consequences varied based on individual participation and evidence. But the accountability did not stop there. The investigation also identified procedural failures within the school system. Complaints that should have been escalated were not. Patterns that should have been recognized were overlooked. Communication gaps allowed problems to continue longer than they should have. Corrective measures were introduced. New reporting procedures were implemented. Staff training requirements expanded. Student support systems received additional funding. For many families, the changes felt overdue, yet they also represented progress. After the meeting concluded, reporters gathered outside hoping to speak with Monica Johnson. Several expected a dramatic statement. Others anticipated criticism directed at the district. Instead, Monica offered something far simpler. This was never about revenge. The crowd fell silent. She continued, "My daughter deserves safety. Every student deserves safety. Accountability matters because it helps prevent the next child from experiencing the same thing." The response quickly spread throughout local media. Many people expected anger. What they witnessed instead was principle. And that distinction resonated. Later that evening, Monica visited Nia's room. The teenager was completing schoolwork from home while preparing to return to classes the following month. For a while, they talked about ordinary things: assignments, friends, movies, life. Then Nia looked up from her laptop. "Do you think people can change?" The question surprised Monica. "Why do you ask?" Nia considered her answer. "Because some of them hurt me." A pause followed. "But I don't want to spend my life hating them." Monica smiled faintly. That response revealed more strength than most people would ever understand. "I think people can change," she said, "but only when they accept responsibility first." Nia nodded slowly. The answer seemed to satisfy her. Outside, evening sunlight faded beyond the windows. For the first time in a very long while, the future felt possible again. Not perfect, not simple, but possible. And sometimes, that was enough. The investigation was over, and accountability had finally arrived. Yet the most important chapter of the story still remained unwritten. As students prepared to move forward, Westbrook High faced one final test: whether the lessons learned from Nia's experience would truly create lasting change. 3 months after the incident that changed Westbrook High School forever, winter arrived. The campus looked much the same as it always had. Students hurried between classes. Teachers prepared lessons, and the daily rhythm of school life continued. Yet beneath the familiar routine, something had changed. People were paying attention. Students spoke up more often when they witnessed cruelty. Teachers responded faster to reports of harassment. Conversations about respect and accountability were no longer treated as temporary concerns. They had become part of the school's culture. On a cold Monday morning, Nia Johnson returned to campus. As she stepped through the front entrance, nervousness settled in her chest. Memories of the hallway, the rumors, and the months of bullying still lingered. Part of her feared that nothing had really changed. But as she walked through the building, she noticed something unexpected. Students smiled. Some greeted her by name. Others simply nodded as they passed. The gestures were small, yet they carried meaning. For the first time since transferring to Westbrook, Nia felt seen as a person rather than a target. During lunch, she sat with a group of classmates, including Marcus Ellis. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost ordinary. They talked about assignments, upcoming exams, and plans for the future. Normal conversation. Normal moments. The kind of experiences Nia had wanted from the very beginning. Later that afternoon, she stopped near a bulletin board displaying one of the school's new anti-bullying initiatives. Across the top appeared a simple message: silence protects the problem. Courage creates change. Nia stood there for a moment, reading the words. Over the past several months, she had learned how true they were. The bullying she endured had not continued because everyone supported it. It had continued because too many people remained silent. Only when students, teachers, and parents chose to speak up did things finally begin to change. That evening, Nia returned home and found Monica preparing dinner. Her mother looked up and smiled. How was school months earlier? That question had been difficult to answer. Now it wasn't. Nia set down her backpack and smiled back. It was good. The answer was simple. But this time, it was true. The story that began with cruelty and fear did not end with revenge. It ended with accountability. It ended with growth. And it ended with a young girl discovering that resilience is not about never falling down. It is about finding the strength to stand again after others tried to keep you there. As the winter sun disappeared beyond the horizon, Nia looked toward the future with something she had not felt in a very long time: hope. Thank you for listening to this story. What happened to Nia Johnson serves as a reminder that bullying is rarely just a series of harmless jokes. Left unchecked, small acts of cruelty can grow into something far more damaging. The most painful part is often not the actions themselves, but the silence that allows them to continue. This story is not about revenge. It is about accountability, responsibility, and the courage to stand up when something is wrong. Whether you are a student, a parent, a teacher, or simply someone witnessing injustice, your voice can make a difference. Sometimes, the person who seems strongest may be carrying a burden no one else can see. If there is one lesson to take away from this story, it is this: kindness matters. Speaking up matters. And doing the right thing matters, even when it is difficult. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of one another.